Senator Thune, good to have you.
Thanks, Hugh. Good morning. Always nice to be with you.
I'm so glad you're here because I think you and Kristi Noem will be alert to what is in this COVID relief bill, which is, I believe, an unconstitutional restriction on the state's ability to use the money that Congress is giving them. We learned in Sebelius they couldn't mandate Medicaid expansion. Here they are saying if you take the money, you can't cut taxes. Doesn't that strike you as diminishing state sovereignty?
Totally. I think it's, and that was added at the last minute because clearly the Democrats want you to spend more money, not to allow the American people to spend that money. And that was not in the original draft of this, but Schumer et al. added this at the end because they want to make sure that these states aren't allowing people to spend their own money. They want to have the government spend it for them. But I think there's an argument that could be made the states could take this to court because clearly this is an infringement on their sovereignty and their ability to use their dollars as they see best.
That's exactly what happened in Sebelius, and the majority agreed that the spending clause is not meant to support the takeover of the state that way. You can give them money, you can incentivize them on small things, but you can't tell them about fiscal policy. Did that even get debated? I think I would have remembered a debate about that. I don't think that got debated.
No, it got thrown in at the last minute. It was in a last-minute ad by Schumer, and I think Wyden and some of the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee. But it was included among those things where the UI benefits, $10,000, is excluded from taxation. They paid for that with a tax increase that they rolled back some of the provisions in the 2017 tax law on net operating losses, and then they stuck this provision in there. I think specifically to stick it in the eye of red state governors who might be inclined to actually reduce taxes on people in their states. And frankly, in South Dakota, that's going to make a lot of sense, Hugh, because we're and a lot of states, honestly, Republican states in particular, are well managed and in good shape fiscally, and so they're going to be trying to figure out how to use this money, and a lot of them will probably want to use it to reduce taxes.
No, I hope the lawsuit is Noem versus Biden. I hope that happens. Let me ask you now about another part of the bill. First, let me ask you about your colleague, Senator Blunt, who was kind enough to host me at one of the conference meetings last year. I came in and chatted with you folks. You're losing an all-star. What are you going to do in Missouri? That adds another ticket to the list. We got 9 races which are now in the hopper that are going to be close.
Right, and Missouri has been leaning Republican, leaning conservative, because I think the Democrat Party has gotten so far left that they're so far out of the mainstream now that these states that used to be so-called swing states are certainly right of center. And if we have a good, right of center candidate there, we ought to be able to hang on to it. But it's a big loss. I mean, as you know, Roy is a workhorse, deeply steeped in policy and understanding of history, and just a real loss in terms of brain power and knowledge and experience in the Senate. But we got to make sure we hang on to that seat and that we get somebody in there to replace him on the ticket that can win in the general election.
When you lose Pat Toomey, Rob Portman, and Roy Blunt, you've lost a lot of brain power. I mean, that's really a lot of institutionalized legislative ability. That's quite a blow to the conference.
Tough year. I mean, you think about it, and you just mentioned those 3 people right there, the depth of experience, and, Portman and Toomey, of course, on tax and trade, understand those issues. The 17 tax bill, I work closely with them on that, and Roy on so many issues, including most recently trying to get this vaccine accelerated. These are people who have been real difference makers, and it's totally really unfortunate for the country and for our party that we're going to be losing that kind of expertise and horsepower. But it is what it is, and we just have to do everything now we can to make sure we hang on to those seats.
Now, Senator, I want to switch over to another provision of the relief bill. I tried to follow the Ronald Reagan admonition if you're looking at a stable for a manure, go find the pony in there. So the pony in this bill is the payment to children of $300 a month if they're 5 and younger, $250 a month if they're 6 and older. That is a voucher in disguise. That is a camouflage voucher, and $1,400 covers some of the upfront costs too. This goes up to $150,000, so it's not poverty line people. I believe that the closed schools across the United States, I don't believe they're closed in South Dakota, but they are in LA and San Francisco and DC and places where teachers unions, Chicago, have all the power. I think parents are going to vote with their checks and move kids to private school. Do Democrats have any idea what they empowered parents to do with this part of the bill?
Probably not. And one of the things, those provisions initially, child tax credit, earned income tax credit, were kind of Republican ideas. It was a way of getting more money in the pockets of families in this country so that they could make decisions about their futures and their children's futures. And your op-ed on this, I think, hits it right on the head. I mean, if parents want to use this in a way that gives them options, gives them choice, and gives them a chance to get their kids in a school where they can learn at the fastest rate possible, and more importantly right now, get into a school, period. This is a great opportunity to do that. And I don't know that the Democrats, you're right, sometimes you have to look at there's blessings in disguise, and in the great Ronald Reagan tradition, this may be something that Republican parents can use to give their kids the best possible educational learning options possible.
So some of the blowback I've gotten have come from elites, like the editor-in-chief of Scientific American agrees that the piece should not be in print, that it's not fit to print, because they hate Catholic education or religious education or private education. Others say it's too expensive. In South Dakota, do you think there are private schools where $3,000 makes a difference in whether or not a kid can attend?
Oh, absolutely. And we've got some really good options. Parochial schools. We get Catholic schools, Christian schools in South Dakota, and honestly more coming. And I think, we've got good public schools in our state too. So, but I just think that anything you can do to give parents more options and more choices for their kids is a good thing. And, I believe, at least in a state like ours in South Dakota, this is an amount of money that will make a significant difference and could be the thing that sort of tips it over the edge in terms of a parent's decision on whether or not to put them at a school, a private school where they feel like they may be getting some of the more of the religious faith-based training and learning that they might not get elsewhere. And more choices, more flexibility for parents is a good thing, and I certainly hope that parents, not only in my state but across the country, look at the options that are available to them, and in our state, including public schools, which are, like I said, ours are very different, I think, than they are other places in the country. But the reason that a lot of these schools around the country are shut down is because the teachers' unions essentially have said we're not, sending our people back to work, irrespective of whether or not they get vaccinated. And we've been blessed in South Dakota that most of our schools have been open for a long time, but I think that parents ought to have more options.
Now, Senator Schumer is never going to win the spelling bee, and he thinks he jammed you. He thinks when they come up to extend this next year, you're going to be in a corner. I'm going to be studying the data to see what parents use this for. He thinks you're not going to extend the child credit next year. I don't think that's a done deal. I think the Republicans will study the data. People like Marco Rubio have been and Senator Romney have been pushing for direct transfer payments to parents for a long time. This is bureaucrat-free. That's why I think it might appeal next year.
It could, and there was a big argument in the 2017 tax bill. We expanded, doubled the size of the child tax credit in that bill for that reason. And one of the reasons for that were people like Marco Rubio and Mike Lee and, as you mentioned, Mitt Romney and others who see this as a way to expand choices and freedom for parents. And, again, ironically, I think a lot of these provisions they were Republican, conservative ideas, and they've gotten traction over time. And I think, Schumer saw this, yes, as a way to stick it to and jam Republicans. But in the end, we'll see when this stuff comes up for renewal. There may be some strong sentiment in favor of extending it because it very well lines up and aligns with Republican thinking when it comes to empowering parents and families.
Okay, last thing has got to be the border, Senator. Rob Portman is going to be on Thursday down. He's going down to the border to visit. I don't know if you're going to be part of that group. It's obviously a crisis. It's obviously self-inflicted. Joe Biden's messaging was, come on, all in free. What happens next?
Well, I mean, the border's open, and this has fueled a crisis in the country. And to give credit where credit's due, the Trump administration did a really good job of getting this thing under control, but now having a lot of these asylum seekers just coming in, unaccompanied minors coming in, reducing enforcement, building the fence, and there are just so many things that they've done, including, revoking the emergency declaration in January and then now sending FEMA down there. So it wasn't an emergency, I guess, but now it's an emergency because we got the Federal Emergency Management Agency heading down to the border to help down there. But this is a big problem for this administration. The left doesn't like an immigration policy that has tough borders in it, and I think he's going to be under a ton of pressure to continue to relax enforcement and to continue to stop building the border wall and to pause deportations and all those sorts of things. But they're going to have to own this, and it's going to continue to be a big problem. I hope they recognize that and take steps to fix it, but I don't know if they have the political wherewithal to do that.
Now, I note that FEMA is going to open the Dallas Convention Center as a temporary shelter for thousands of migrant teenage boys. That's not going to end well. I had 2 teenage boys, and if you put thousands of them in a convention center, I don't care how well staffed it is, that is not going to end well because they're teenage boys.
Totally, and I raised girls, Hugh, but I grew up with boys. I've got a lot of a lot of nephews, and that's not going to end well. But during the reconciliation debate, we actually had a couple of amendments that we offered that would have the Democrats all voted in lockstep against, that would have used some of that $2 trillion to address the problem of unaccompanied minors at our border. And like I said, they all block voted against it. This is going to be a huge problem, and it may eclipse anything else that they think they're doing well right now, to include this coronavirus relief bill that's going to put a lot of money out there. But if the borders start becoming even a bigger emergency than they already are, in a major crisis for the country, it's going to be on them because this is all they're doing.
Last question, Senator Thune. The president and the vice president are going to take a victory lap over the next couple of weeks. If they are honest and open the doors to the public, they're going to see a lot of open the schools signs and close the border. Open the schools, close the border. And they're going to get, I think we might be on a Tea Party moment like 10 years ago when the first stimulus passed. Do you agree with me that they have miscalculated perhaps the saliency of these 2 issues?
I think politically they run the risk. I mean, they could do great harm to their cause. I mean, they picked up some wins in suburban areas in the 20 election, but if they want to hold some of those voters, this is the absolute opposite way to go about it, because those parents, those suburban voters, are people who care deeply about getting their kids back to school and also care deeply about not having an open border policy where you've got coronavirus and who knows what all else coming into our country. I mean, I think this is a big political problem for them, because I don't think their left will let them exercise more discipline there. But if they continue down this track, I think it has tremendous it's fraught for them politically.
I agree.
It could be a huge issue in the next election.
Close the borders and open the schools, not the other way around. Senator Thune, great to talk to you as always. Thank you, Senator.
Sounds like
Love having John Thune.